Hey everybody, welcome to a new episode of Talking Some Sens. Alongside me, as always, I've got Chris Sinclair
Hello, folks.
and I've got Alex Langlois.
Howdy, howdy. Go, Sens, go.
Go Sens go. How are you guys doing this week? I'll throw it over to you, Alex, first.
I'm doing pretty good. I mean, it's good week for the Sens overall. I think 2-1 for the so can't complain. And now we're getting ready for the Sweden trip, so can't argue with that. Yeah, so far pretty good.
Awesome. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, I'd say overall not bad. There were some pretty low lows, but overall, let's look at the big picture and say we're 2 for 3 over the past 3 games. So I'll take that as a win. So here we are. Before a big trip overseas, where we're hoping we could see something different than the last time we went overseas. I'd say, yeah, let's no big trades. This is much better.
Just to say, my anxiety's a little high because last time they went to Sweden, 5 years of hell followed. So hopefully we're getting past that.
Hopefully
Exactly.
it's the opposite. Hopefully it's the opposite.
Let's hope so.
But yeah, in preparation for the Ottawa Senators trip to Sweden, we've got a bit of a lighter episode for you folks today. We're going to talk about the last week in the Senators, talk about their week against the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Vancouver Canucks, and the Calgary Flames. We're going to jump into previewing the Sweden trip, talking about our memories of last year's. Not last year, but the last time around, where the Senators faced off against the Colorado Avalanche twice. If I remember correctly, they won both games. But we'll talk about that a little later there. And after that, we've got a guest interview with the one and only Shawn Simpson, formerly of TSN, now with Sick Podcast Network. And that'll be it for this episode. It's just more of a lighter episode for you guys today. Hopefully, it won't take too long. Nice little buffer before the Europe trip. With that being said, let's jump right into the last week in the Ottawa Senators season. So the Senators played 3 games in the last week and a bit, facing off first of all against the Toronto Maple Leafs, where they won 6-3. Next of all, playing against the Vancouver Canucks, where they lost 5-2. And then facing off against the Calgary Flames, winning 1-4. One of these games were away, which was the Toronto game, and the other ones were at home. First and foremost, Alex, what was your thoughts on the Toronto game? Let's start off with that one.
Well, before I get to the Toronto game, I just want to say I was buckled up pretty tight for these 3 games because it felt like I was on a roller coaster, going up and down, up and down, up and down, and finally, it felt like we were finally going up, and then big drop, and then up, big drop. So with the Toronto game, and it all started with the Toronto game. They had a terrible first period. I thought they didn't play. They started out very slow. They didn't really come out of the gates flying like you'd expect in a Battle of Ontario, and they pretty much came out flat in my opinion. And then as the game went on, which I mean, surprisingly, our second periods always have been notoriously our worst periods, but this one was okay, I think. But then that third period is when they really found their gear and really dominated. That Matthew Joseph, I think, had the best game in a Sanders uniform that game for sure. So yeah, I thought that they found their groove. I think they need to find it early and step on the gas a bit earlier, especially against some high octane offense teams like Toronto, who every time they're in the offensive zone, there's a threat to score. So I think I I, I don't remember. I think Corpusalo started that game, and Corpusalo is really coming out of his shell a little bit. He was a little bit worrisome at first, but he's definitely shown us why we signed him for that 5-year contract. He's made some amazing saves and has kept us in a lot and has changed the momentum. And I think he kind of steered the ship a little bit. They started off as the ship was starting to sink, and he kind of turned on his superhuman and kind of lifted the ship a little bit above the water, and that gave the guys enough of momentum to win the game. So, yeah.
That's well said. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, definitely agree with you, Alex. I'm looking over my notes here from the games, and I'm just, the biggest standout for me. We could start with the Leafs game. Ultimately, it was structure, and that's been if I never in my life, and I've said this numerous times, if I never in my life have to talk about the Ottawa Senators and their structure in a negative way, I would be so thrilled, because that's their opportunity right now. So their opportunity starts with their defensive structure. There isn't one, which then causes issues transitioning to the neutral zone, and then ultimately creating sustained offensive zone pressure. And that's their issue right now, is that they cannot get that structure where they push the puck out of their own zone confidently. They're not just chipping it out. They're not doing a dump and chase. And then they get it to the neutral zone, and then they can create something in the offensive zone. So then what ultimately means, and this is for the last 3 games, fortunately enough, 2 of these last 3 games have somehow magically worked out for them. Again, Korpisalo is absolutely a big part of that. But the reality is that they're not able, they're relying too much. And I wrote about this, like a shameless plug here. I wrote about this today, where I said that if they were able to create that sustained, like, defensive structure, where their defense is able to find their matchups in the defensive zone, get in front of the net, clear the net, and then also have your forwards be able to get in the lanes, be aggressive on defense, active sticks. Then they will be able to create a better structure in the defensive zone to be able to transition that to the neutral zone, create some sustained pressure in the offensive zone. We saw that at periods throughout the Calgary game, right? Where they were able to create that in the Calgary game, where it was dynamic, it was fun, it was entertaining, it was fast. They were able to pick up the puck and then move it so fast to the offensive zone. If they're able to do that more consistently, then that's what we're talking about. But until they're able to do that more consistently, and that involves that structure that starts in the defensive zone, this is going to be as you said, Alex, it's going to be a roller coaster of a season. And so that's one of the big takeaways, was that structure. And I don't want to say structure in a negative way anymore throughout this season. That's kind of those are some of my takeaways.
Yeah, and I'll Jake, before I pass it over to you. Yeah, we had this conversation in the group chat, Chris. I think it was around that time in Calgary where they started dominating, and we're like, where were these guys? Like, the Vancouver game was, I mean, we'll get to the Vancouver game in a bit, but that game was terrible. Like, there was no structure, there was no consistency, and you could see the structure kind of turning at the end of the Toronto game, where it's like, okay, they kind of figured it out, and then just when you think they have it, they lose again, and then you're like, where is the structure that they had the last 5 minutes of the Toronto game when they scored like 3 goals? Like, where is that? Like, and then you go to Vancouver, they played terrible. You go to Calgary, we'll go through the games, but consistency needs to be like, it's the key to their season at this point. They have a good enough team to do it. They just need to be consistent.
See, my biggest add-on here is, one thing I will say is the Ottawa Senators' biggest issue, yes, is their consistency. But we're talking about a win here against Toronto Maple Leafs, by the way. My biggest concern with the Senators, and we can dive into it a bit deeper at a later episode, but I just want to add it here. When it comes to the Senators, last year they were great on special teams, but sucked big time on 5v5. And so far this year has been pretty much similar. Their special teams are not nearly as good as they were last year, but they're still pretty good. But the issue with it is, I find, if you look at the penalty kill, which I believe is headed by Davis Payne, I believe. So no, he does the power play. The penalty kill is Jack Capuano, I believe. Yeah, Jack Capuano is the penalty kill. You can actually see a structure there. It's a zone penalty kill. Like it's a box zone. You're not the most active out there, which I prefer more of an active penalty kill, but at least there's the actual structure. They've each got their box, and each got their man. And when it comes to the power play, they've each got their thing there. I forget exactly what their power play is, but there's a certain structure to it that they do follow. But when it comes to the 5v5, my biggest issue is there's no set in stone plays that I can recognize at my obviously untrained eye. If there are, they're very, very sloppy, and they're just not consistent with it. And that's what I believe is leading the Senators to have so many losses. I feel like their only real instructions, from my point of view, when it comes to the 5v5 point of thing, is try to get it in, but the second you see something going wrong, dump it. And that's a losing mentality in my eyes. You got to try to force things. I know it's not really tying to the Toronto game itself, but it's just something I wanted to add on to what Chris was saying. What are you guys' thoughts on that? I'll start with you, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, like the biggest issue, like you said on 5-5, is they don't have sustained offensive zone pressure, so they can never get something set up. It's always like the dump and chase is fine when you're, you've been in your own zone for a little bit and you need a break, but like they need to be able to have someone to carry the puck in, whether that's a Jake Sanderson or an Eric Brandstrom, or that's what Thomas Chabot should be doing if he's out there, is a defenseman that can just carry the puck in and while the other guy set up, or like Tim Stutz is perfect for that. I mean, he can drive the play. You need a lot. I feel like their play drivers aren't necessarily playing like driving the play at all. Like they you're right, Jake. They get to the blue, like get to the line, dump and chase, and then they go straight in and try and like play a physical game, which I mean that's DJ Smith's style. It's like that in junior as well. But I feel like our team's too skilled to do that, and I feel like we need to have more sustained offensive zone pressure to be able to actually set up anything. Their PK, I mean, to me, it looked like a minor. I know you said it was fine. To me, it looks terrible. I think their PK is absolutely terrible. I think it looks like me in beer league after 3 beers. I'm diving all over the ice trying to make plays, trying to make things happen. Like I just,
See,
go ahead.
I'm in agreement, but the reason why I said it was fine is because there's an actual structure to it compared to zero structure. And what I mean by that is when you look at Guy Boucher, he was all structure. When you look at DJ Smith, it's the exact opposite. And that's why I think we need to have some sort of in the middle. And that's why I like the PK compared to the 5v5. It's ineffective. It is. But at least they're following a structure to have a logic behind it.
I mean, we can agree to disagree on that one. I think they want to play the box, but they don't know how to play the box. Let's be real. Like,
yeah,
you have players down in the corner trying to protect a pass, and there's a guy open on the other side of the net, or you have a forward diving trying to swing at his stick or trying to block shots. Like,
they're doing a very passive aggressive box, which is not what they should be doing.
Like there's clearly a system they should be playing, and whether the players aren't understanding what they need to do, or the whoever, I think you said it was Jack Capuano who's doing
Jack
PK,
Capuano's PK.
Whether he's not getting the message across, which I think ultimately it falls on the coach if their players aren't playing well that way. Like, I think their PK is terrible. Like, I think the Corpusalo is the reason why our PK is not even worse, to be honest. Like,
agreed.
I just think they're all over the place. Chris, you can chime in whatever. I see itching to get in on this one. So
yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I've been dying over here. So it comes down to 2 things. From what I've seen, it's that the defense is unable to box out their players. So whether that's on the PK or whether that's just 5-on-5, it doesn't matter. They're unable to box out their players. So whether that's as a result of poor positioning, poor reads on those plays, at the end of the day, they are unable to consistently. There are times, absolutely, whether it's, we'll get to this in a moment, but I thought JBD had a great game against Calgary, really got in the lanes, blocked a ton of shots, was quietly, and that's exactly what I want him to be, quietly really good. At the end of the day, they're not consistently, or they're inconsistently able to get into those lanes and box out their players. And then the flip side of that is whether it's PK, whether it's 5-on-5, their forwards are they're unable to actually consistently commit to defense. So I think then the forwards are now relying more heavily on the defense, and the defense is more heavily relying on the goaltender. And then now no one has their player. No one has they don't have their guy, right? And so that's my issue, is that if everyone committed to playing defense, team defense, forwards, and again, this is not saying I'm painting a broad stroke. That's not to say it's a broad stroke. There are a few players who are doing really well. I think of Rourke Chartier, who's doing really well defensively, not offensively, although he did get a goal the other night. I'm thinking about, there are a number of players who haven't committed 100% to playing defense, forwards, and then defense are just unable to know where their position is, and everyone will converse to one side. No one collapses down low, which means that now they're relying on their goaltender. And unfortunately, in our loss, it was Forsberg, who was often left in a position where he was unable to make that save. But that save, while it would have been great for him to have, should have been boxed out by another player. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely nailed it on the head. I feel like their PK, like they're following the puck. They're following the puck. The puck goes there. Three guys move over instead of having the forward kind of playing between the both defense, and then you have the two defensemen kind of taking turns in the net, and then the other guy kind of cycling around. Like that's the way it's supposed to be. And I feel like the guys on the PK just either they're not moving their feet, so they just get like outplayed, or they're not thinking the game fast enough right now. But it seems like they're always getting beat with like quick passes, and it's like I'm watching TV and to be fair, TV you see a wider scope, but I'm watching TV and I can see exactly where the puck's going. Like I know exactly that this guy's open on TV, and it's just like our guys don't realize it, and then they look back and no one's there. It's like there's three guys turning their heads at the same time, and it's like a clear open shot. So it's like I don't know. Something needs to change on the PK for them to be successful. But yeah, I'll leave it at that because I feel like we spent a lot of time on this one. But we'll
Yeah, moving their feet, I think that's a great point. So yeah, thanks for shouting that out. Absolutely agree with that. Yeah.
It's a very good point. And with that done there, let's move on to the next game to break down really quickly. This one was a bit more of a depressing game. The home loss against the Vancouver Canucks for the Ottawa Senators ultimately fell 5-2. The Senators' goal scorers in this game were none other than Drake Batherson and Artem Zub. Fun fact: Drake Batherson is on a 2-game goal streak. For the Vancouver Canucks, the goal scorers were Brock Besser, who scored 2 goals, Ilya Mikheyev, who also scored 2. Oh, no, sorry. Ilya Mikheyev scored 2 goals, Brock Besser scored 1, and JT Miller scored 1, and Elias Pettersson scored the final goal. The Ottawa Senators dominated in shots, 30 shots compared to 16. Face-off, Ottawa won that 58%. Just all that stuff. On paper at least, Ottawa seemed to have the better game. But it was not really that case, in my opinion. On paper is not what really happened in that game. Goaltending was not good that game, and while the Ottawa Senators were able to keep shots down to 16, all the shots were very high dangerous. And on that, I'm going to throw it to Alex.
Yeah, like you said, Jake, like on paper, look at the Sens. Like if you didn't watch that game, which I didn't watch all of it, to be fair, I was busy, but I watched the second and third period, so I got most of it. But and obviously I tuned in here and there when I could. Like I was at a restaurant, so I was watching the game and turning my eyes every now and then. But like I don't even know what to say. Like the goaltending, Forsberg was not good. Some of the goals he let in were terrible, absolutely terrible. It's worrying to me how like going into the season, I felt confident with Forsberg, Korpisalo. Now I'm worried that we have Forsberg as our backup right now, and I'm sure he'll get in the groove. He hasn't played, and like he doesn't play consistently enough to find his groove. So hopefully this Sweden trip allows him to kind of, he's going back home. So yeah, that'll help. But anyways, back to the Vancouver game. Go ahead, Jake. I can see you want to chime in.
Sorry, I just want to chime in there before I forget what my train of thought there. My little funny 2 cents is the first couple of games of the season, Korpisalo didn't look ready, but Forsberg did. But now that Korpisalo is playing great, Forsberg's kind of cold, which kind of means that so far the trend has been, well, one goalie's been great, the other one has been cold, which for me is a problem but it's not as big as a problem when you have another goalie that's super hot. That's all I'm going to say there. I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, I mean, you always play the hot hand. That's just the way it goes. But what was it? The Vancouver game? Yeah, that I mean, I hate to say it, but I bet against the Sens that game. I just had this feeling or knew right away. It's like a trend that's been happening all season. I bet. I mean, it was a risky bet, but I picked Elias Pettersson to score a hat trick against us. Like that's how bad a $2 bet. So I didn't lose that much money. But it was just one of those games where like I have a gut feeling. Like it's just a trend, right? Like we chatted about it at the start of the podcast. It goes up and down, up and down, up and down. So naturally, the Calgary game was an up, and then the next game, hopefully, it's not a down, but that's trendy wise. So I can't speak too much on the Vancouver games. I didn't watch it in detail like Chris, you probably have, but I do know that it was not good. The goaltending was not good. The players looked like they were all over the place. They finally started to figure a little bit of it out near the end of the game and kind of put a bit more pressure, but like from what I've seen, it just like looks like the shots they got were just like dump ins, hit off someone's skate, went to the net, or they weren't high dangerous shots like Jake you said. And it seems like every time Vancouver had the puck, they were trying to score. So I can't speak more on it, but I unfortunately I've seen that loss coming.
So I'll chime in here just quickly and say after the first period, Ottawa was outshot 11-3, and my notes were poor start, defensive breakdowns led to Vancouver's goals, no sustained pressure. Second period, Vancouver was only at 9 shots by the second period, and Ottawa was at 19. And it was a much better defensive structure, which was great. And that defensive structure created the Zub goal, which got them 2-2, which is great. So after 2 periods, the second period was their better period. Third period, everything fell apart. And again, it comes down to zone structure. So I literally said zone structure an issue here as Vancouver scores 4-2. And again, to your point, Alex, Forsberg was just not very good. Forsberg should have got a lot of those goals. He's going to look back on those and say, I should have had those goals or those shots. So ultimately, again, this is a game where we see when you talk about the roller coaster, and I'm going to say, I'll end on this. The roller coaster is 100% dependent on their structure, which sounds crazy because it seems straightforward. But when they're good, it's because their structure is good. They're moving that puck. They're getting in lanes. They're aggressive on those shooters. They're aggressive in their lanes. Active sticks. When they're terrible, we have Vancouver. Back to you, Jake.
Sorry, I'm just going to chime in real quick. I know we need to be a bit quicker, but let's talk about the structure, and that's the frustrating part, especially when it comes to this whole DJ should be fired, DJ shouldn't be fired. I'm not going to get into it, but
that'll be for another episode.
Yeah, when the structure's on, it's on, and you can see the players understand the assignment. DJ has it down to a nail, but then it just seems like he's either not a very good communicator on the bench, or there's a lack of communication somewhere, or just all of a sudden falls apart, or they don't start out right. Like it just seems like they know, they understand the structure, but he just can't relay the message, or someone on the bench can't relay the message properly, which then ends up collapsing. So it's iffy because when the structure's on, they're fantastic, and it worked perfect for the type of team they have. But more times than not, it's not on. So
love that perspective, Alex. Great job. Absolutely agree.
Yeah, you took the words right away from me. I was literally about to say those exact words. Well, not the exact same words, but the same message. That was exactly what I was alluding to. When the Sens are on, it's because they stick to their structure, like you and Chris both say. When they're off, it's because they're not following that structure. DJ Smith, if he's going to keep his job, he's got to find a way to keep that structure as consistent as possible. And with that, let's jump into the Ottawa Senators win against the Calgary Flames, where the Ottawa Senators won 4-1. And Matthew Joseph scored a goal. Jake Batherson scored another goal. Rook Sharchi and Travis Hamonic scored. My goodness, I forgot about that. That's the game that where Rook Sharchi, I believe, scored his first goal in 5 years, right? Something like that. But what are your thoughts on that game, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, this guy. I watched this full game, and I think that's probably their best game of the 3 games they played. I think they came out right. They came out I wouldn't say they came out hot, but they came out with a it goes back to structure again, but they came out with a solid structure, and it never faded until the whole game. Like you could see they when they had the puck in the offensive zone, there was always a threat to score. When the puck was in their zone, the Calgary Calgary had the puck in Ottawa's zone, obviously I'm always worried, but I wasn't as worried because you could see the structure kind of happening. You could see the guys playing their man properly and playing their position properly. So I think this overall was their best game, and I just want to shout out Matthew Joseph. He has had a phenomenal stretch here. His speed is looking like it's like this is what we needed him from him last year, and him playing with Stutzler and Giroux, who Stutzler can create the plays, Giroux can his hockey IQ's off the charts. He knows where to be at all times, and Joseph's speed. I think that's going to be a combination that's going to be deadly. But yeah, sorry, I heard a noise over there. But yeah, I think that was their best game of the season. Not the season, sorry, the 3 games. The 3 games that they played, I think that was their most structured, their most just overall game. Like it just felt like we chatted about it, Chris. If they play like this every game, there'd be no issues. So yeah, I think Corpusalo made a lot of saves at the start to keep us into it, and again, we kind of directed the heat off of the slower start, I'd say, but just because they didn't come out hot, like they didn't put a lot of. But anyways, yeah.
Yeah, I'd say this was the game, to your point, of the 3 games, their strongest overall game. I think the other game, obviously, Vancouver was a bit of a dumpster fire, but in terms of their wins, this was their strongest win, and this is actually, in my opinion, one of their strongest wins of the season. I think the difference for me was that they all committed to really strong defensive pressure. So when they were in the D zone, they were all and this is direct contradiction to what I had previously said, where everyone had actually committed to playing defense. And on top of that, we had Korpisalo, I think, is far and away the starting goaltender for this team. I think he's demonstrated that time and time again. Even when he got pulled, I thought that and this is prior to the 3 games. Even when he got pulled, I thought that he should have stayed in. But I would say this is the first game where they played team defense and really sustained great offensive pressure. The issue that I have is now that transition game. So that was where I thought that they had lost it a little bit. And that was, one of the notes that I had made was that their neutral zone presence wasn't what I had wanted it to be or what I would have expected it to be. I would have loved to see there be a quicker transition game, which would have helped them to get it out of their zone so that they're not relying on Korpisalo to make those saves and bail them out, or relying on their defense to be able to make those, to get in the lanes and rely on them quite so heavily. So if they can refine that, then I would say the Calgary game is absolutely the game that you want to, at least from my perspective, from what I recall, the game that you ultimately want to take as sort of a blueprint as to what a successful game would look like, and then just refine it a little bit. So that's what I would say. Only issue I had, neutral zone. Otherwise, really happy. That was a great game.
Yeah, it was like you said, it was probably the best game of that whole stretch, and in my opinion, the best game of the season, or if not the best, one of the best games of the season so far. Season's young, and honestly, I was happy with that effort. And yeah, their only real, I guess, weak point that game was their neutral zone. Korpisalo played phenomenal. Oh, did you have something to say there, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I can get to it later, but I was gonna say, I was like, this 3-game stretch was really when the leader stepped up. Like they after that whole DJ Smith thing, the booing and whatnot, whether you agree with it or not, the players were not happy with it. They answered, and I think most of them answered the call anyways. The leaders, the guys that really spoke out about it, were not happy about it. They came and showed us, like, we can play better than this. We have it in us. And Giroux and Kachuk mostly, but Giroux especially, he said something and he played lights out. Those all 3. Well, Vancouver game's iffy, but he was noticeable. So I'll leave it at that. They backed it up. So
agreed. On that note, though, let's pay some bills here. let's talk about our very good sponsor, DraftKings. So I'm known to put a couple shekels on a couple games here and there, and DraftKings is a great place to do that. DraftKings is you can bet on literally any sport possible. Hockey, soccer, football, literally you name it. They got great deals going on for football. They got great deals all over the place. And one of the apps, one of the deals I want to talk to you about is if you download the app now and you use code THPN, new customers get $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting $5 on hockey. Put $5 on the Senators at some point this next week, and you can get $150 in bonus bets. That's code THPN only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. The crown is yours. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after they're issued. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, 21 age plus age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expired 168 hours after they're issued. See dkng.com/hockey for eligibility and deposit restrictions. Terms and responsible gambling resources. NHL and the NHL Shield are registered trademarks of the NHL and the National Hockey League. All rights reserved. On that note, let's bring it back to the Ottawa Senators here. After that three game stretch, the Ottawa Senators are off to Europe to play in the NHL Global Series. They will be facing off against, if I remember correctly, the Minnesota Wild and who else, Chris? I'm blanking here.
So it'll be the Detroit Red Wings first, and then it will be the Minnesota Wild after. Yes.
Yes, that's right. My app kind of crashed there. I had the NHL app in front of me. But yes, on November 16th, they will face off against the Detroit Red Wings at 2 p.m. And on November 18th, 2 days later, they will face off against the Minnesota Wild at 11 a.m. Ahead of this trip, they were able to call up Jacob Larson and Mads Søgaard. This is just this is not because anybody's going to miss time. It's just as a backup in case someone were to get hurt in Sweden or something were to happen. And honestly, I'm happy that they called up European guys. They called up Jacob Larson. Jacob Larson is from Sweden, so it makes sense to call him up. He's probably not the number one guy in your depth chart, but because he's Swedish, he's probably the guy they went with in that case. And similarly enough with Mads Søgaard. Mads Søgaard is the best goalie Ottawa has. It's not in the NHL. And while Belleville's definitely going to miss him, it makes sense to call him up as a third goalie in case something were to happen with either Forsberg or Søgaard. I'm going to flip you over to Alex. What are your thoughts on this two game, I guess, series in Sweden?
I'm nervous. I'm really nervous about it. I don't know how to feel about it, to be honest. Like I look at the schedule, I'm like, Minnesota's a tough opponent. You got Detroit, who's a divisional game, and it's a tough opponent. I don't know if it's hopefully over the roller coaster, we can get on the office roller coaster soon and know what to expect from game to game. But I really don't know. I think the Sens need to win both games. There's no question about it. They need to come out of the Sweden trip on a win and just continue winning throughout the month of November, and they'll be right back in the race if they do that. They're slowly climbing back into it, but they're not. I wouldn't say they're out of it yet. But the good thing playing Minnesota is Gustafsson has not had a good season. He's been terrible, and I think they're going to go with him against Ottawa because he's from Sweden. So I wouldn't be surprised if he starts in Sweden. So hopefully that gives us a little bit of hope. I just think they need to play their game. I think they need to play defensively. I think they need to play structured. Like Chris says, I feel like structured should be our new slogan on this. Just play structured. That's all they need to do, and they'll be fine. But yeah, I'm really nervous about this trip. So I'm gonna say our Sens come out 1-1, but they need to come out 2-0. But I'm gonna be optimistic and say 1-1. And I wouldn't be surprised personally if Matt Søgaard even gets a game. I don't know how they're going to make this work, but all 3 goalies are from the Scandinavia area: Sweden, Finland, Denmark. So they're all close. They're all close to home. So we'll
So I will add on that. I don't think Mads Sogren is allowed to play unless someone gets hurt because he's not a regular roster call-up. He's one of those exception call-ups. So I think he's just like an emergency backup goalie. He can only play if someone gets hurt, is what I believe.
There's loopholes. They'll say he has a flu or something, and you'll be fine.
We'll see what happens. But I will take that to say, sorry, I'm taking your thunder there, Chris, but I will say this really quickly before I throw it to you. The Ottawa Senators began their rebuild after the final Swedish trip. It would be really cool and such a storybook ending if this Swedish trip was the beginning of the end of the rebuild. What are your thoughts on that, Chris?
I'm going to keep things short and just say I expect them to go 1-1 on this in this series. I would love for them to go 2-0, as you said, Alex. I think they're going to go over there. They're going to be on a high. They're going to win the first game. They're going to lose the second game, but they need to win both games in order to come back and continue, the success that they've had, at least in this, when we look at these last 3 games, 2 of 3 go over there. It would be great for them to win 2 of those. They're going to probably only win 1. I think defense is going to be an issue. I agree with you, Alex, saying that our show should just be called defense, just defense, because that's what we keep talking about, but that's their opportunity. I would say, 1-1, ideally they'll finish. I would love to see them finish 2-0. They're not going to. They're going to win against Detroit. They're going to lose against, they're going to win against Detroit. They're going to lose against Minnesota is what I'm going to say.
I'm the opposite.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I kind of committed, but I've committed to that. So, I would say that's where we're looking at. But yeah, I would say this is the defining moment for them. If they don't come back with a winning record, I'm going to be really disappointed. And I think that that really puts us in a hole. And I question, and we can get to this on another episode about what this means for DJ. But DJ knows he has to be successful on this trip. And if he doesn't have this team set up for success, he's gone, and it's going to be tough. But he's gone. But yeah, that's where I'm at.
I was going to say the same thing. He probably brought a cold cloth them to Sweden and put it under his seat because it's a little hot right now. And I know they said they committed to him, but if he comes back here with 0-2, like I think that's it. But anyway, we can talk more about it on another episode. But
yeah, he does. He doesn't. He just left in Sweden if they are 0-2. Absolutely, yeah.
DJ Smith has a one-way ticket to Sweden. That's it. He'll coach a Swedish club next.
the way back's really questionable, but I think they're going to lose to beat Minnesota and lose to Detroit. I think Luke Raymond's going to annihilate us. I think he's going to have the biggest game of his career in front of a hometown crowd. So that's kind of how I'm feeling about that. But hopefully they go 2-0.
My only real prediction, because I'm trying to avoid being heartbroken, is that Brady Tkachuk and Alex DeBrincat will get into a fight. That's my only real prediction. It's not going to happen.
Never going to happen. But
it's not going to happen.
Enthusiasm. No, it's that's that'll considering DeBrincat was a part of Tkachuk's wedding party, I would say, or at least at the wedding. Sorry, he's this past summer at Tkachuk's wedding. I can't imagine a scenario in which they actually get into more of a scrap than just I hate you, you hate me, and then we'll dip after the games.
Wouldn't be surprised though if someone does fight to Brinkett, and if it's gonna be like a Zach McEwen or a Parker Kelly or someone that kind of that needs
someone's gonna fight him.
Like I mean, maybe I don't know if this is the place to do it. I think this would actually be a pretty tame game. It's just European. Much bigger ice, right? You gotta keep that in mind. Much bigger ice.
Oh, that's right. It is a bigger. I forgot about that. Ooh, Brady Tkachuk's gonna have fun.
Which is gonna really, just quickly, it's gonna really be advantageous for a player like Stützle, who's used to the larger ice and who's used to more space to be able to create plays. Keep an eye on Stützle, who it literally is 3 years out from 2 years, 3 years out from playing on this ice daily. Keep an eye on Stützle. That's if you're going to ask me who's a player I would keep an eye on for this series, it's Stützle.
I'm saying Brand's
So pretty
fun.
much you're telling me to bet my house on Stutzel having a hat trick each game.
Yes, yeah, and Branny will be on each of those assists.
Oh yeah.
Gamble responsibly though.
Oh yeah, I'm not going to bet my house. Don't worry. I will bet my. I'll bet this this can of Canada Dry. And we're back. Sorry, we took a little break there because we had technical difficulties, like always. That's going to be a theme with this next interview because I had to unfortunately dip out for 5 minutes during it because my computer decided to not work anymore. God, I love the internet, right, Chris?
I love it. Always consistent.
Oh yeah. Consistently inconsistent.
There it is.
That's the Ottawa Senators right there.
Oh, there it is. Yes, absolutely.
There we go. I'm gonna start using that. But yeah, this week we were joined by none other than TSN's formerly TSN's Shawn Simpson, who is now with the Sick Podcast Network. Shawn Simpson was nice enough to give us, I'm going to say, just over an hour of his time, and we were able to talk about a lot of topics surrounding coaching, surrounding his career, surrounding some of the media, some talking about what he thinks is important to general manager, all those different areas. And we were very, very, very thankful to be able to sit down with Shawn Simpson. Did you have anything to add on that, Chris?
Yeah, I would just say quickly, obviously, on top of what you've said, the fact that Shawn Simpson, Simmer, was able to take some time with us was an incredible opportunity. I've listened to him for years on TSN 1200. So to be able to have an opportunity to connect with him and have a great conversation. And he was very candid, really, really, really knowledgeable, really passionate about hockey. And at the end of the day, we got a chance at the end of the interview, and you'll see it and hear it, and it's going to be awesome. But at the end of the interview, we got some hot takes with him, and it was just a great conversation, super casual. Felt like a bunch of friends just chatting about hockey, and that's what I think Simmer's all about. So really appreciate him taking that time and yeah, just hanging out with us. It was an incredible opportunity. An hour and 10 minutes or whatever it was flew by. It was awesome. Love that guy.
Yeah, and before I throw it to that, I just want to say there's a couple of opportunities where he decided to chirp me. So I think I'm going to take that. Take that just and earlier I said for TSN, formerly TSN, I wasn't a chirp. It's just I'm so used to saying TSN Shawn Simpson. But I'm just going to say that I think that little mess up there is fine, considering that he was chirping me all throughout the podcast. So I'm not going to edit it out. Based on that, I'm just going to throw it to Simmer. Thank you so much for enjoying this this edition of the Talking Some Senators podcast. We're not going to come back with an ending. We're just going to end off after that interview. So thank you so very much for listening to this edition of this Talking Some Senators podcast. We'll be back soon, and thank you so much for listening. Hey, welcome back to Talking Some Sens, and here we are joined by the one and only Shawn Simpson.
Afternoon, boys. How are you?
Welcome aboard. Glad to have you here. Thanks so much for taking the time. Today's been a busy day for you, so we appreciate you hanging out with us for a bit and chatting some Sens, chatting your career. Super stoked.
Yeah. Now I've got to ask, because I've never met you. Are you actually the same person, but one person's decided to wear a ball cap and glasses, or are you actually?
That's how we reduce overhead.
Like I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, now, yeah, that's wild.
It was part of the hiring process.
That's some. You got some pretty serious production going here.
It's true. It's not easy, but we made it happen.
Awesome.
No, it's all post.
Yeah.
No, but thank you so very much for taking the time to come on our show. And
anytime.
You're really, really busy, so thank you very much for that.
I'm not actually, but we all say that in life, right?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I got so much going on here. I'm out of work and I'm doing a podcast an hour a day, but oh my God, I am so busy. I got to go. No, I can't even say I got to go shovel. There's nothing to shovel. So I'll figure out something. But hey, you know what? This is fun. This time of year too, I'm sure you guys feel the same. Bit of the weather change, kind of nice hunkering down inside and just talking a little hockey. And even if the Sens aren't winning a ton, it's still fun just to get on with people, get on and have a little fun discussion.
Yes, absolutely agree. Now more than ever, we it feels like we've gone so long without any Sens talk or without any sort of hockey talk. So this is great to be able to hang out. And yeah, you're right. It's crummy weather outside. Now we get to hang out. It's just a bunch of guys hanging out talking about hockey, and there's nothing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna get into it right now. Just not take up too much of your time, but first question, first and foremost, before we get into your pro hockey career, because we've jumped this interview up in a couple sections. I want to talk about what made you decide to be a goalie. Why did you want pucks thrown at you?
I have no idea, guys. I kind of go back to, and you would think somebody is an adopted child from a broken family. The insecurity of being a goaltender, probably not the right choice. I'm going to guess as I was being sorted out and sorted around, I'm kind of guessing I wasn't very good as a player. And there's probably a decision to put me in net. And then next thing you know, kind of took off. And for the first little while, I played forward and played goal, but I think it might have been as simple as that. Allowed me to get into competitive hockey fairly quickly with East Ottawa. Then we moved into Orleans, got in with the Gloucester Rangers. So, yeah, I'm going to guess that was probably the rationale, and probably a pretty good choice now when I look back at it, but I cannot recall it fully.
That's fair. That's fair.
Did you? So, I guess just to kind of piggyback off, did you ever think about going to a different position and being like, you know what, now I've kind of done this goaltender thing, I'm going to try.
I don't think so.
Defense, and then I went to goaltending.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think the little bit I can recall kind of being a forward and that, like I said, I don't think I was overly effective. So it wasn't like, oh my God, you're this star-studded. And all of a sudden the gear was there. And then we lived on the air base back in the day. It's long gone, Rockcliffe. But we went to East Ottawa and I got a set of goalie gear and ended up giving it a try. And yeah, I never looked back. There were a lot of times where I thought, man, it's way more fun being a player. But from a competitive standpoint, it brought me obviously to levels that I never in my wildest dream would end up doing. And what was also neat, guys, growing up, and maybe this is a bit of the balance, I played a ton of outdoor hockey, and I'm not talking street hockey. I'm talking walking over to the rink and skating. And I really got a fill there where I just loved getting out and skating. And I think pretty quickly recognized as you get up to what would now be AAA, it wasn't one of those situations where even by 10 years old, you're looking around and think I'm going to switch positions. Hey, that's what kind of was going to be the forecast looking ahead, and I just enjoyed it.
That's a good point. When I played, I was pretty much just a left winger. That's pretty boring.
Yeah, same as your politics.
Hot takes already.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Well, bring it back to this though. You were drafted in the third round in the 1986 draft. Do you want to just talk about a bit about the draft? What's your experience was there? Being in the third round, I don't know how far teams decide to interview prospects. Did you interview many teams? If you did, just kind of that topic.
Well, it was different. The draft was in 1986. The interviewing process wasn't the same. Now, technically, because there's 32 team guys, you have to say I'm a second round pick. Let's get, out of that. I was in the 60th, so now I'd be a second round guy. But it was much different. I did meet with the Washington Capitals, and their goaltender coach had come up to watch me, Warren Strelo, a very famous goalie coach. From that day on, I had their book and their media guide, and my heart was set on being a Washington Capital. I met with Jack Button, the late great and the father of Craig Button. Our son Todd works for Calgary, I believe, still. So that was kind of my team and my thought, but it was different. Larry Kelly was my agent. We went to the draft. It wasn't a big deal. What was really cool, though, and again, I had no expectations growing up I kind of thought about playing Central Junior Hockey. Never thought I'd make the OHL. And the draft was in Montreal. And I grew up a huge Montreal Canadiens fan. So the idea of it being in Montreal, the idea of getting drafted, ended up coming kind of fast and furious. I went right from midget hockey to Ontario Hockey League, had an absolute crap year in the OHL, somehow still got drafted. But yeah, it was a neat experience. Went to Washington right after for kind of like a little mini camp, but times have certainly changed. So that was my team. That was my thought. And all of a sudden I'm a Washington Capital and just absolutely loved it.
And so, your career was, with absolutely no disrespect, was mostly in the AHL.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is absolutely, they say that it's easy to play in the NHL. It's really difficult now to play in the AHL. Very unique on that. But what are some of your fondest memories of spending time in the AHL? Like, those relationships that you built? What, like,
Yeah.
walk us through.
Oh, it was fun. You know, it was really cool being on your own for the first time. But, you know, the part of, and I ended up with a bit of a knee injury. But realistically, when you look back, I can't say it was injury ended. I wasn't good enough at the end of the day. I was also fortunate pretty quickly to move into some other things. But as far as junior hockey, the American Hockey League, you're young single guys. And at this case, living on my own, or at least living alone, had a roommate, Jimmy Rivnak. We lived in Baltimore. It's just a great time. It's a hoot living down in the United States. You got a little bit of money in your pocket. You're a professional athlete. I did dress for 3 games, which is kind of comical when you think about my thing. 1988, I'm at the playoffs as a third goaltender with Washington. Pete Peters got knocked out. I dressed for that game. I later got called for an emergency backup. Baltimore's playing. I'm doing the radio. They actually brought me down to Washington to back up a game there. And then one regular season game, I think 1990, I backed up, and that was against the Montreal Canadiens. So that was my fill of the NHL. As far as the American Hockey League, it was fun. What's interesting about the American League is nobody wants to be there. That part of, or kind of, there's no pride or building on. No, hey, I'm in the AHL. We cheer against the NHL team when they're winning. We look at this as a circumstance of we want to be in the National Hockey League. What was probably the biggest thrill, guys, to be quite honest, is going to training camp. Going to training camp in the National Hockey League and walking in and seeing people like Rod Langlois or Scott Stevens and Mike Gartner and Dino Ciccarelli, and you run through it. That to me was an incredibly big thrill. So those are really the memories you end up having. And like I said, just a whole lot of fun.
What was it like, just quickly, what was it like to be to dress? Not to say whether you were an emergency backup or whatever. What was it like to actually sit?
Yeah. Oh, it's incredible. And again, I think it's amazing in life. Like I kind of set, and at one point I said to myself as I got pretty good, I want to get drafted in the NHL. It was weird. Maybe I didn't dream about playing in the NHL. I then wanted to get into broadcasting, work in the NHL. But it's crazy in the sense of, and maybe that's just me, that was kind of the goal I had for myself, putting on the equipment, being in the dressing room, coming out and sitting on the bench. It's impossible to really, it's utopia, and most guys that are in the NHL would be like, well, that's great. I want to be on the ice. For me, it was really incredible. I got called up in the 88 playoffs, as I said, to be the third goaltender. Being around the team and being around the playoffs and seeing it, it was larger than life for me. And maybe one of the reasons why I fell a little bit short to playing it, but it was incredible. Like I said, I look back to it and, just that zone and being back the next day and having a locker and everything else around the players. Yeah. Very, very cool experience for, at that time, you're 18, 19, 20 years old. Very, very amazing.
Well, I just want to piggyback there on, but you said you dressed for 3 games but didn't play them. What was your experience in terms of how did your NHL teammates treat you? Like, did you have a good relationship with your NHL teammates while you were there for those 3 games?
Oh, they're always great. Yeah, I mean, you knew some of the guys from training camp, and at that point, you already have some of your buddies that might be playing. So, no, everyone's very supportive. And then the other part, hey, you're the backup goaltender. You're not looking exactly. And at that time, Brian Murray was a coach. You had Terry Murray, you had David Poyle, you had Jack Budd, and you had a lot of familiarity. Washington Capitals were a very run-well organization, made you feel part of a family right from the day you're drafted. So, it was nothing but cool. And like I said, you just looked up to these guys. And I remember post-game going for a couple of pops and hanging out with them. And that was about as far as I needed life to go. I ended up going into TV, and I would travel. And when I was out at the bar after, I'd be telling people I was a third goaltender. I mean, it was just, to me, if I could do that the rest of my life as a single guy, I thought, how much better can life get?
My goodness, talk about a great, management team, having, Brian Murray and all those folks. Man, they would be such foundational people in hockey, even to this day. Absolutely.
Oh, it was. And I was fortunate. And again, I started so young that I was out of the NHL at 40, then I ended up going to the KHL, then I got into broadcasting, but I honestly had almost a full career. And so much of it was learned by that group. No, that was really a foundation, not only for work, but for life. And David Poyle, anyone that's been around him, just one of the best people on the planet. People will point to the fact of didn't win Stanley Cups, which I understand. He wanted to so badly, but there's not a better manager of people. There's not anybody that's more kind, that is able to basically see people through life, see families, make people feel like a family. And no, he was a great general manager and a great mentor for the years that I worked for him.
Absolutely, yeah, and I know that you've spoken fondly, especially of Poyle, over the years. on the radio, you speak quite fondly, and I think you're not the only person who does that. And he's well respected within the NHL community on and off the ice, which is incredible. Your career, as you kind of alluded to, was ultimately cut short. Injuries, things like that. Do you mind, like, obviously we don't have to spend too much time dwelling on these sort of negative experiences that you may have gone through. It's interesting when you think about what might happen off the ice with injuries and things like that. Maybe we, like, as a fan, I don't necessarily get that perspective. I'd love to hear your perspective on what it was like to deal with those injuries. You kind of come back, you're not able to, and then you have to decide, this is it, I'm out, I can't do this anymore. What does that do for your mindset? What does that do for your sort of mentality?
Well, at the time I ended up getting hurt, guys, and this is where you got to have full clarity. My contract had come up. It was more of a question, do I want to go back at it? Now, to that, do I want to go to another organization? I kind of run my course in Washington. They had Byron Defoe, Ole Colsey coming along, Jim Carey. Well, that was after that. It was a realization at that point. I started doing the color on the radio in Baltimore. And what was cool about that at the time is that David Poyle and the coaches and the families all listened to the broadcast, including Doug McLean. And they realized, wow, you're a pretty good broadcaster. And at that summer, it was kind of a junction of, hey, listen, do you want to do some community involvement? Do you want to do a little color on the radio between Baltimore and Washington? Because they didn't have a color person on the radio. So at 22 years old, I'm being offered the opportunity to do that. It was a quick segue. I realized it was home. I realized it was family. I didn't know exactly what it would build up to at that point, but I knew I was smart enough. I'm a touch and go American League goaltender, which is touch and go to all of a sudden end up in the East Coast League. It was a real smart career move at that point to decide, hey, put the old hockey equipment in the bag and move forward with another career, which was involved and could be part of the sport.
Okay. Awesome. On that note, though, you said you were hired. So after your playing career, you were hired a bit more into a radio position, and you said that just kind of happened. How did you eventually switch from radio color to eventually being a scout for the team?
It was incredible because the world at that time was much smaller. Pro scouting had just started. The size of the staffs, what was going on, and I was just very fortunate to be in the right place at the right time, given an opportunity. Started out in pro scouting, and of all things, guys, it was amazing. I would have been 24 years old. I was doing pro scouting. I was doing the color now on the TV. At the same time doing amateur scouting. I was also living in the city, working in the front office. So it was as much just given an opportunity. And again, very weird because you're not in a hockey city. So it's not like there's a ton of people looking around for these opportunities. And I think really right place at the right time and took full advantage of it. And like I said, very thankful to Jack Button and to David Poyle to look at me and think, hey, it is given an opportunity. You know what I mean? I'm not saying at that time I really had understood conceptually how it worked. I didn't have a great eye for talent, but I was given that opportunity to build through that, to build an eye, to get an idea of how the industry worked. And that set me up for a pretty nice career. That's a very good point. I was wondering if you could run down a bit. Everybody knows that an amateur scout goes and watches a bunch of young players and gives the opinion to the general manager and management team. But what exactly does a pro scout do? Most part, it used to be at that time, there was a little bit of pre-scouting going on, but even at that, it's old, but there were tapes and all of a sudden there were a lot of games on satellite. Nowadays, hey, you've got every game taped. You've got all the tape broken. Pro scouting, quite simply, is going out and at the American League level, the European level, could be the World Junior, but more than anything, to scout in the National Hockey League. And also, I'll say this, everybody's got tape on players. It really is a lot of information gathering. It's going to places and say last year in Ottawa, trying to explain why Anthony Joseph is playing so poorly. You kind of see it from an eye test, but what is happening? And I think we'll agree it's the odd time. Generally, when are you trading for players? When they're struggling, when something comes up. So it really is information. It's the opportunity to go and scout, kind of keep a heartbeat on what's happening. And I guess if you can, kind of stay ahead of the curve as far as what's happening on news or where there might be movement, what teams are struggling. Like right now with the Edmonton Oilers, are they looking to do something? And would there end up being a fit for your own club?
Okay. Well, and to build off that again, you said a lot of it's fact finding. So you said there was a bit bits and pieces about watching game tape and all that stuff. Does it also include talking to players to kind of gauge their personality, or is that not really an area that's considered at all?
First of all, it's not an area considered, but you're not allowed to. One of the things you have to be careful of, and this is where a lot of teams, one of the reasons they put so much into amateur scouting and to this testing now, is that that's your database to have on a player at 18 to kind of going forward of, hey, at least remember you sat down with them a little bit. Well, after that, it's hands off. You don't have any ability. So no, there's none of that going on. It is really just trying to kind of figure out, hey, what's happening in different situations, try to figure out if somebody's struggling, what's happening behind the scenes. And then there's certainly also the eye test of recognizing that a player is trending this way, or just as important, and we've seen this a lot here in Ottawa, not getting a hold of players when maybe they're on the back nine or they're struggling a little bit.
Nice. And so, I mean, we've talked a little bit about your scouting career or what goes into that role. You actually had the opportunity, you were promoted from scout to director of hockey ops with your Capitals. So first of all, what was that like to actually now be a part of or to be in that organization? And then also kind of a quick follow-up to that would be, how did that came to be, and what were some of the the responsibilities under both roles, and what was your overall experience in that space?
Well, it was a great experience. The unfortunate, it came at 29 years old, and realistically looking back, I wasn't ready for it. What ended up happening is David Poyle got fired, George McPhee came in, so I was in a bit of a transition, and in hindsight, probably my biggest career mistake, no fault. I should have went to Nashville. I was offered the assistant GM job, which was the equivalent of what I took in Washington. Also had the opportunity to be a general manager in the IHL, so I'm balancing all this. Washington was my team. I was married at the time. We were expecting a family, had bought a house. So I made the decision, and no fault to George McPhee, but David Poyle gave me my chance. I would have learned a lot more, but all of a sudden, director of hockey operations, I was a general manager of the American League team. I was doing a ton of pro and amateur scouting and realistically still learning the industry. Got in with a group that I didn't know all that well, and it was actually very difficult. And probably 7 years later, after I had learned it, I was let go, and then I went on to Toronto. But it was a great experience, had a ton, but in hindsight, the wrong career decision at the same time, just took on way too much responsibility. It was just, you look back and traveling 250 days a year, you're all over the place. And now they've got a singular person usually actually handling the farm team, not even doing pro scouting, not doing some of the other stuff. So really probably spread myself very thin, but don't regret it either. It was actually it was a great 7-year period.
So this is very surprising because I've never heard you speak about the opportunity you had in Nashville. So I just want to quickly, for what you can disclose, obviously we want to be mindful of the process and all that sort of stuff, but would you mind sharing a little bit more about maybe what that interview process was like, and then why you ultimately chose not to take that role and to stick with the Caps?
Well, it was simple. I mean, David Poyle said he wanted me to go, and then he didn't have a job at the time. When he got the Nashville job, he wanted me to go. Now, I didn't push for it, but at the same time, be quite honest with you, the Washington Capitals didn't let me go. And I don't look back at that as a bitterness. I got an elevation. I got obviously a big pay raise, everything else. So it was really more of, no, you're not allowed to go. And I could have filled out the last year of my contract. And I also, as I said, look back, had I really pushed for it, I think they'd probably let me go. Yeah. But David Poyle already knew me. He wanted me to the right-hand man to go in and start this. And do I have some days where I think, boy, in 1997, had I moved to Nashville and 26 years later, working with Barry Trotz and working with David, where I'd be? But hey, that's life. And like I said, I don't regret the experience. It was just one of those forks in the road. And at the time, I didn't have a lot of people to lean on. Didn't have this is kind of a personal choice, and you do the best that you can, and wasn't a wrong choice. There wasn't a wrong choice in the process. I just realized looking back now that I could have went into a little situation there to learn a lot more from, an experienced general manager. At the same time, George McPhee certainly could have used a more experienced person in my position as a first-time general manager.
That actually makes a lot of sense, and it honestly paints a lot of paints a better picture as to why you're, because I've seen you on Twitter very often say Steve Staios is great at what he does, but he should have a guy to buffer him out, and that little discussion there paints a better picture of that. So thank you for talking about that.
Well, it's important. And I think there's also a fine line, and people would see myself as someone that worked in the National Hockey League. And sometimes people take it as a bitterness, or you point it out. And there's a wave, and I have fun with my analogies. And with Ian for a long time, I joked about politics and how the National Hockey League, how some politicians and worlds, and you go back to Barack Obama, you're better not to have had a past. People want fresh and new. And when you hear this brought up, I respect it. Do you want fresh and new? Absolutely you do. Do I speak from experience of working in the NHL that there's a learning curve to come in? And this idea that you're just going to throw, and I know the numbers and the analytics side, which I respect, and I want a balance of that along with hockey people. But this idea that a brand new head coach and a brand new GM and president of hockey operations, they're just going to roll in with, and I don't want to even say numbers, but this fresh approach. It's not the way that a business works. Any business, they're not putting you in charge of a multi-million, if you want to say billion-dollar company. And for Steve Staios, he's worked in junior hockey. He apprenticed for a year with the Edmonton Oilers. He doesn't have a clue what he's doing right now. It takes a long time. And I'm sure he thought he was going to come in and apprentice basically under Pierre Dorion, then make some decisions. So that's the part of, and, for Matthew Darsh, whoever it ends up being, I just understand the Ottawa Senators, for Steve Staios and DJ Smith. First of all, they need an experienced coach right now, but they certainly need experience to help Steve along. He just does quite simply have that rate, in place. And president of hockey operations was more of come in and support the group, not all of a sudden be the man on the watch.
Thank you for elaborating on it again. But bringing it back to a bit about your career now. So you said you had basically departed the Washington Capitals to join the Maple Leafs organization as a pro scout. How did that job come along for you?
It came quickly. I was good friends with John Ferguson Jr. And again, a little bit of, I had never switched jobs, never switched companies. I was in a super quick rush to grab a job, and I was friendly with Fergie, and I didn't really understand the dynamics of going to Toronto, understanding where Fergie was at, kind of what I was getting myself into. But it was cool. But I also say this, as a kid that grew up in Ottawa, I was a Canadiens fan. I lived in the United States for 20 plus years. For me, the Toronto Maple Leafs were just another job. It wasn't like a fantasy of working for Montreal. And I lived in Rhode Island, a part of New England at the time. So it was interesting. That was the decision I made. And as I said, a couple of spots there in hindsight, but I'm not going to say that all of a sudden I would have still been working or be a general manager, won a bunch of Stanley Cups. But it was one of those ones that all of a sudden where Toronto was at with a salary cap coming in, I'm not sure we really had any opportunity to turn that ship around and take it to the promised land. It just was one of those uphill tasks that was virtually impossible.
All right.
Okay. So when we talk about, unfortunately, obviously in this case, things happened with the Leafs and they decided to kind of switch some things up and decided to go a bit of a different direction with you. And unfortunately you were let go.
Yeah.
Obviously that sucks.
Oh yeah.
I don't want to spend too much time talking about you losing your job or anything like that.
Oh no, it's okay. It's reality.
Yeah. I think that when we talk about, especially right now here in Ottawa, Pierre Dorion lost his job.
Oh yeah.
It happens all the time. So we were interested to find out a little bit more about what does it feel like to feel like you're putting in all, like you're all in, all your eggs are in this basket, and then it's determined that you've got to head in a bit of a different direction, and and so what does that feel like to be let go? What does it feel like to be to go through that process of the GM talking to you and saying like, well, you got to go, or the owner telling you to go? What does that feel like? And
it's always a general manager. I mean, you're not, again, the ownership, depending where you're at. First of all, that's not going to end up happening. Washington, it was one of those ones. To me, it had run its course, and it was more of contract was up. I was super pumped to kind of go somewhere fresh, do something different. And in the case of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I'll also say, as that came along, there was a realization John Ferguson had been fired. I was his guy, one of his guys. So I knew I was going to be let go. What's it like? Well, it's no fun. Also, from a personal standpoint, I had just gone through a divorce. You're doing that. And then all of a sudden, an opportunity came to either stay or go to the KHL. And I thought, well, this will be fresh. This will be new. This will be an opportunity. So it's kind of where life ends up taking you. But like I said, neither time, and especially in the case of Toronto, it's not like you're walking in and you're shocked. tough part is you work in professional sports. A lot of people, and even more so in Canada, I wasn't living there, but for Pierre Dorion, it's magnified. Everybody knows you got fired. Well, people get fired all the time. It's not in the newspaper. It's not in the news. It is a different element to it. So you understand it's something you sign up for. You love it. You want to be part of it. Everyone in hockey, for the most part, at some point gets let go. And it was more at that point, I was like, okay, give me something fresh here and let's get on to the next adventure.
I love that. It's as someone who's fortunately enough never been fired from a job, I can't imagine what that would feel like. But it's great
exactly.
When you're so passionate about something, it helps to be able to just like, you know what, there's going to be these experiences that I've had in the past, these connections I've made will help lead me to wherever my next adventure would be.
Exactly.
Nice. Okay.
A little bit of a follow-up there. You had mentioned that you had an opportunity to either stay in North America or go. What was that opportunity, and why did you end up choosing to go to Russia?
At that time, it was just to go back into amateur scouting. Some of the dynamics of what I wanted to do at that point, where I was living, wasn't super comfortable to do that. I didn't really know the New England and kind of that area. So Glenn Hanlon had called me, and he had put together a group in Minsk, Dynamo Minsk, and it wasn't even right away. But I also had to take some time. I had a year left on my contract to sort out my personal life. Again, I think anyone can understand if you're going through a divorce, you have a couple of kids. So it was just right there of, I'm not going to hit the road right now. So it just turned into some of the timing. And also after having done that for 11 straight years, that had been a lot of travel. There's a lot of stress and other things going on. So it was just the right time, to kind of take a deep breath here. And then, like I said, presented the opportunity of a lifetime to go over and be in the KHL, which is one of the coolest life experiences I've ever had.
So do you mind? So this is going to be kind of a both North America and KHL kind of question here. So do you mind expanding, first of all, on more about what that experience was like over in the KHL? I think we all have this kind of perception of what, it would be like to play in that league, but to actually be a part of that league would be great for us to be able to hear about that. And then my follow-up to that is on the NHL side, you recently shared that you actually interviewed for the assistant GM's role in Ottawa. So I was hoping to hear a little bit about, what that process was like. What did it feel like? What did it feel like to come back home? And what did it feel like to be maybe at least in the running for essentially your hometown team?
Well, kind of the timeline, guys. I ended up going to the KHL, and it was back and forth. And again, if you understand the KHL, incredible to go to a city like Minsk. You're living in a communist country. It was just very cool. I love Russian history. I'd studied it almost all my life. So going and traveling around Russia and understanding and respecting the culture, understanding and respecting how good the hockey was, like I say, just an absolutely cool experience. Now, dealing with the people there, it's a whole different world. You're fired one day, you're back the next day. I was very proud the first summer I went over, though. I sat there by myself, put together an entire hockey team. And again, I had a fairly good budget, but we didn't have an import rule. So I brought players from North America, Finland, Sweden, from the Swiss league, some Belarusian players along with Russia. And, we put together a team that got to a slow start, but I ended up going to the Spangler Cup that year and we won it, which I was pretty proud of. People don't, look back on those things, but it was an amazing life experience going around. It's not at that point, you had direct deposit, you're getting paid. Now, are there strange things that happen? Sure. But it really was at that point, they had turned the corner. It was a good place to play. And like I said, just absolutely loved it. What was interesting at that point, though, by the time I finished up in the KHL, I had to figure out from a lifestyle standpoint what the hell to do. And this is also part of, I was coming back to North America. I made the decision to come back to Ottawa. And at that point, I had nothing going on. So that's really where nothing had happened hockey-wise. That same September, I ended up going to Minnesota's training camp. We had talked about doing some consulting, kind of moving along, but nothing was firm. And that's where I said to myself at that point, maybe you got to change gears here. I had reached out to JR at the radio station, said, hey, he met me for a coffee in Canada, and they were getting through some transition of people leaving and just a timing thing. And I ended up doing some part-time radio work. Following year, got a show. It did not come as far as the interviewing to the assistant GM job until I believe 2018. So I was well into my radio career. I got a call out of the blue from Pierre Dorion, pretty abrupt. Shawn Simpson, Pierre Dorion. want to interview for the assistant GM job. I'm like, okay, why are you talking so loud? But that's fine. So we ended up meeting out at one of the hangars at the airport, little office there where they go and do the charter flights, and met for 6 hours. I didn't think I'd get the job. I didn't really even have that crazy. Now, if they'd offered me the job, would I have taken it? Probably. But to be quite honest with you, Eugene Melnick and what was going on at the team around the time, it was just for me more justification of people always saw it on the radio. You talk a lot. You're very opinionated. And I'm like, well, you know what? The Ottawa Senators must think something of my opinion if they're inviting me to be the assistant GM or interviewing me. And that's one thing I always try to say to people. The hockey team and the public might not like what you're saying, but don't for a minute realize that the Ottawa Senators are listening to your voice, and they may not like what you're saying, but they respect your opinion. So it's cool to sit down with Pierre and kind of go through that. And like I said, it really kind of just personally substantiated the fact of, like I said, people are listening every day. People get all fired up at times. They don't want to hear your opinion. They don't want to hear anything negative, but the organization was listening closely. And like I said, I knew deep down that they respected what I was saying.
I have a bit of a I have a bit of a follow-up there. You said you talked to Pierre Dorion for a good 6 hours. I know you can't share exact specifics, but what were your thoughts on that whole process?
Oh, it was fun, but it was also with Pierre. I had known Pierre all the way back to when I first got drafted in the Ontario Hockey League. His dad was a scout for Central Scouting. The year I got drafted to the NHL, his dad was the head of Central Scouting. They were Orleans people. I got to know Pierre fairly early in the industry when he started, had lots of beer with him, lots of talk, him and Tim Murray. So it was very comforting. And we just sat down and talked. I think at the time, and I know at the time, they were looking for more of a contract guy. That was also part of it. And Peter McTavish did a great job. That's not really my thing. I love to be in the field, love to be out scouting, doing different things. But we just sat down and talked. And, it was nice, but it was very comforting. It wasn't anything over the top. And my preparation, I think, based on knowing the Sens was strong. As far as knowing the rest of the league at that point, basically 7 years, well, actually almost 10 years removed from it, I wasn't as well versed on everything because I also say I sit and watch games, but that's not my job. I'm not out being a pro scout. I know the Ottawa Senators very well. So, like I said, very, very cool just to sit down and, talk some hockey and realize there were some little points there. And I wrote down quite a few things that I was also able to share on the radio later that, certainly some inside information that the majority of people aren't going to have out there.
Mm-hmm. That's a very, very good perspective. And I know you can't share too much about it, but you said that Peter McTavish ended up getting that job, and he was more of a contract guy. But if I remember correctly, he was also running the AHL team. Do you know if you would have had that opportunity had you gotten that job?
I have no idea. I hope not. And I say that because I did the job in Portland for 7 years. One of the most overrated things that people spend time on is spending time with your farm team. It is one of those things that, and we'll use Belleville as an example this year. Okay, you set up your farm team, you get your players down there. Is it important for management to have a view? Absolutely. Do you need to be at every game? Absolutely not. I'll even say that for managers in the National Hockey League. What are you doing? Like, you're just showing up and watching, you're being seen in the press box, going down, your American League team is set. Make sure your prospects are playing, make sure things are happening. But this watchdog idea, you're much better to get out in the field, get out on a night and be pro scouting, seeing other teams in the NHL, going and watching some of your other prospects, going out and scouting even other teams' prospects. So as I said, as to how that would have worked out, it's really more of an administrative job. Like, it is mostly of, is my roster full? Is it set? Do we need to call somebody up from the East Coast League? Who's getting called up to the National Hockey League? So as I said, it doesn't fit what I really like to do. I like to, as I said, I love watching players, love being out in the field at the end of the day. And I guess at this point, it's all hypothetical. Other than to say, I know Peter did a really nice job in the role, and I know Ryan Bonus is doing a nice job right now.
Yeah, and as someone who, over the past probably year or 2 years, I've really kind of dove a little bit, a lot more into scouting reports and learning about players. I did a ton of work for this past draft this summer, and along with the Professional Women's Hockey League, I've been doing a lot of scouting reports for them as well. So hearing you speak about that, I understand, at least to some degree, when you're really passionate about the scouting side of things, that's something that will always be a part of you. So I understand why you would say, you know what, I'm not a contract guy. I want to be out in the field. I want to be doing that kind of stuff, because that speaks to me, that resonates with me, because that's where I would want to be as well. And so I also understand though that, you know, when you see the GM or whatever, you know, they always pan to the GM and there's the GM just writing a bunch of notes. That's great. But, you know, like to your point, I actually kind of understand why you would say, you know what, get out in the field, be connecting with different, different leagues, looking at what your future is going to be, looking at what your next opportunity, your drafting, you know, what does your drafting look like this year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now is probably more important than you attending a game, eh?
Well, and the levels of scouting, and it's certainly gotten better and better with video, with the numbers, but there's also, quite simply, at the end of the day, it's hard to know who to respect, who's actually even watched the games. Now, I certainly think at the end of the day, it doesn't have to be all live, but it certainly helps. And then you get so many different reports where who's copied and pasted, who's taken this. I mean, there's so much information out there at the end of the day. And what do the teams think? And then for general managers, one of the things is you become out of touch. You sit there a whole year and watch your own team. Okay, that's great. And it's great to know your own players, but why don't you use some time to get out and watch other games? And credit to Pierre Dorion. He was pretty active in the draft. But when you're looking at the rest of the league, it's nice to have a pulse on that. Like I said, a general manager, when he shows up and it looks so busy in what you're doing, and certainly you're on the phone, but a lot of times on a game day, hey, you go to the morning skate, you're on the phone for a little while, and then you go up and watch the game and come down and either give the coaches a hug or you give them a slap in the face and you're pissed off at some of the players of what's going on. But it's not once the season is rolling, like, you know, and like I said, you can end up wasting quite a bit of time just trailing your own team around.
Well, especially with Dorian being his background is in scouting, so it's
for sure
natural for him to want to be there. So I guess I understand it from that perspective, but I get where you're coming from, Jake. If you want to take it from here.
Yeah, my last question about I guess your managerial career in pro hockey. What was your day-to-day responsibilities in Russia? What did your job entail?
Well, it was basically running the team at the time. It was very cool. I'd went over there. We were building a new rink, which I was a little bit involved in, kind of some of the spacing. I was involved in that in Washington as well, of, you know, just some of the design, not building, though. Let's not get carried away here. But it was also working with the national team in Belarus, identifying young players coming up. The structure of the hockey system there was really starting to deteriorate because of the lack of funding. And then from the KHL side, it was really cool. Keeping an eye on players and other teams, keeping an eye on different tournaments. But it was just kind of putting together the day-to-day roster and working with Glenn Hanlon at the time. Dave Lewis was an assistant coach, and Michael Leonard, Robin's dad, was actually our goalie coach, along with the late great Vladdy Siplikov. So it was just like any other manager, being around the team, getting out scouting, and at least for that first year, just kind of getting to know the KHL and figuring out what worked and what didn't work, and really understanding that it was by far the second best league in the world, in the sense of much closer to the NHL than a lot of other leagues. The KHL is much bigger, much stronger, and much faster than any of the other European leagues.
Nice. And you know, I kind of want to, you know, we've kind of touched on it a couple of times, or you've touched on it a couple of times, but you managed to find your way back to Ottawa.
Yeah. Sports
radio. And we kind of wanted to learn a little bit more, not to kind of shift kind of quite so abruptly, but we kind of wanted to hear a little bit more, especially obviously we are really passionate Sens fans. We have our own podcast, getting an idea as to what it looks like, not to say that this would be transitioned anywhere, but like just to understand what it's like in the you know, station, the media landscape. And then obviously the follow-up to that is naturally, unfortunately, you were someone who was let go along with Igor Sage. And so, you know, so one thing would be, what was it like to be on the radio? And now what is it like then when you've realized or recognized that the next step for you might be to get into this podcasting space along with us, along with a ton of other people? What was that process like? And how has it felt to transition to that space?
Well, first of all, as far as the radio side of it, it was a blast. It was a great job. I felt like based on what I had done in my career, it set up perfectly for it. Worked with Ian Mendes, who was great. JR is a great boss. We had a great show. What was very different on the mindset, I understood the economics, and that is a part of it. I mean, getting let go in Toronto or Washington, you understand it's performance related. I have nothing but pride of what we did in there. And hey, simple at the end of the day, they're cutting back. They're cutting the station. They've cut the hours. They've cut all the things. So you look at that and just say, hey, thanks for a great 11 years. Super proud of the relationships I established, the professional respect that I ended up getting over the case. And then, hey, it happened. And for the summer, just kind of took a break and kind of stepped back. And then next phase, next thought, did not want to get on the road and start hitting the scouting again. And then it was like, okay, I know there's a lot of podcasts out there, but I think I certainly have a unique skill set, get into something, get with the right people, just start something. And hey, quite simply, as the season came along, guys, just nice to get busy. And I also just think that there may be a million podcasts out there. There might be a deterioration in the radio side of it, but I also feel like it's headed towards, and none of us have a vision for where it's all going to go, but the interest level and how it's broadcast and how it's, taken in or whatever you want to say, the appetite is still there. It's still huge in the market. It's still huge overall in sports. I'm just not sure where it's going to go. And for right now, best vehicle is to hop on something, to stay busy. And hey, let's see where the world ends up bringing us as far as the media side of it. But my TSN time, like I said, just an absolute blast. Love doing it. And from Ian, then working with JR and Hammer, it was utopia. It was just it was a hobby, to show up for 4 hours every day and work with great people. And as bad as the Sens were, as crazy as it was under Eugene Melnick, part of me was looking forward to better times. And then I'm like, come on, finally, we got a good situation here. And you get the notice that we're restructuring. So, hey, move on and keep your head up and keep smiling and look forward to the next opportunity.
Well, I do just want to say, I think it's important to, we have you here. So I just want to say the number of times where I'd be walking my dog, who for all of our YouTube viewers have seen in and out of this video so far.
Yeah.
He and I would walk, along the canal every morning, and I'd be listening to your voice. I'd wake up at 7:30 every morning. So that was a ritual for me every morning. So to have you, and obviously JR and Hammer as a part of my mornings however, it felt like a long time. It was an incredible experience, and your perspectives, sometimes they were hot takes, and I absolutely appreciate that. I love that. I love your insights. So I just wanted to kind of quickly chime in here before I throw it over to Jake, just to say that.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. And that's part of it. Again, early on, you're getting used to it. And I had a pretty hard take on Bobby Ryan. I kind of use that as the benchmark. And that's when Twitter first started out. But it took me some time. Now, I don't regret what I said. And I think at the end of the day, I proved to be accurate. But it was a whole world of getting used to. And then as you build along, you don't take it so seriously. You have fun with it, and you're given opinions, but there's a confidence level. And what's neat, guys, sports radio or talk radio is such a different animal because it allows you to make a human connection with people. And even for myself, when I kind of went sideways when I got divorced and left Toronto, one of the things I started listening to, I had never listened to it. I started listening to WEI radio in Boston, and I actually became fairly attached to it. And I really could understand where started to get to know the people, kind of timing in life. And then I knew when you took the job, it's not like doing a radio or a TV hit. You got an opportunity here, and you can lay it on the line any way you'll like it, but just be yourself and let people get to know you. And that really created such a fun connection with people over the 11 years. And one of those things, and getting back and getting to know people in Ottawa and appreciate those kind words, that's what made the job so much fun, was that live interaction every day. And even if it's one person listening or thousands, it was just fun to have that interconnection with so many good people.
Yeah, and you did a great job. So I just wanted you to.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that, brother.
Yeah, Jake, I'll throw it to you.
Tying it back to the job of it all. For those who don't work in sports media like myself, like I like to say, I'm a podcaster at the end of the day. I like to say I'm big shot, but I'm not. But at the end, I'm a podcaster.
Yeah.
What does your job really entail? Like, can you paint a picture of what your responsibilities at the studio actually were, other than just talking on the radio?
That's about it. And that was one of the things of doing what I did, and this is part of what made it such a great job. And now as I transition to the podcasting side, Hammer set the show. He was in there working, doing all the production. JR certainly had the subjects, had the background. You show up as a co-host. And again, part of it, I guess, is some of your expertise. It was the easiest job in the world. And part of that is working with great people. Now, you had to have the preparation. It's not like you're showing up and you don't know what you're talking about, but so much of the heavy lifting was done by other people. And that pretty much was your responsibility at the end of the day, to bring a background, to stay current. But man, oh man, the production side of it and the hours that Hammer put in, and the preparation, and between JR and Ian, you couldn't ask for more. You're talking to people that have come in, that have put hours upon hours, and you respect the fact of they prepared enough for probably 12 hours. So whatever you're going to get through the 4 hours, you're thankful to have it. They set the table for it, and you turn on the mic and you're off and running.
Yeah, and I think
or do you turn on the mic? You don't turn it off. You turn it on.
Yeah, definitely do. Yeah, yeah. I have that issue sometimes. So, I would say, based off of, you had a great show today with Lever Sage and Ian Mendez, where you got a chance to kind of reminisce, especially at the end of the show, where you were talking about that kind of dynamic and that kind of, how each one of you kind of played off of one another and ultimately helped one another become where you are now, where it's, it helped you develop. And I think we felt that when we were listening to, the different dynamics, right? So it's not that you're always going to have the same dynamic with each and every individual, but that each and every individual challenges you or makes you think differently, or kind of, ultimately pushes you forward in whatever different kind of way. And it was great to feel that, and to feel like we were there with you during that experience. So that's something.
Yeah, and it all became very relaxed with everybody. Like initially for Ian coming in, and part of it was, hey, I just come into broadcasting, and there was some frustration on his part where, again, he came from the broadcasting world. We worked that out. That was great. I also recognized for Ian, he was around the rink all the time. And when I'm tossing bombs all the time and he's hearing back from the Sens and from Brian Murray, it create some pressure points. I got pressure all the time. And then as I phased in with JR and Hammer, it was just interesting because, and I'll say with Ian as well, but the nicest part, there were no egos involved. Nobody was pretending to roll in and be this or be that. And this is one of the keys, guys, and one of the keys in life. We're able to have fun with each other versus making fun or putting each other down. And anybody that's been in any work environment can totally relate to that, of knowing who you can have give and take with. And when I joke about Hammer in his car, him being shorter and he can give me a hard time, JR, you can laugh it off. I never walked out of a show feeling bad for having said something. So that utopian type of a situation allows you to be the absolute best worker you possibly can. And that's something that's not easy. And everyone can appreciate that out there. There's people that are insecure. There's people that have a mega ego. There can be different pressures in any type of industry. So when you hit that sweet spot, and not only with that show, but the other people around you that, as I said today, when you run into them, your guard's down. You have to feel lucky in life to enjoy those types of people, because whether it's family or friends, there's lots of people out there that you don't feel like that. It's more like, okay, I got to get through this moment. Got to kind of have my guard up, but at the same time, put a smile on my face.
So, and I appreciate that, and I respect that. And speaking of respect, I think it's important to acknowledge just how much we respect and appreciate the fact that you, Simmer, were able to come on today, take the time out of your day to be able to hang out. We only have a couple more questions for you, and we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit. So we're going to throw some Sens related stuff. So we wanted to wrap it up with,
rapid fire.
Yeah, rapid fire. We're going to throw some things at you. So I'm going to start off with kind of a broad question, I guess. So maybe not quite so rapid fire, but so the Sens, what are your thoughts on their season so far?
Season so far has been the best start that they've had in a number of years as far as the overall. There's some real good checks and balances, but at the end of the day, it's still same old, same old. It's a hockey team that can work hard, that is a pretty good hockey team, but they don't play properly. Fundamentally, they're not good, and quite simply, they're not going to go anywhere. You're going to have a win. You're going to get excited. You're going to come back down like last night, and it'll just be the same old, same old. That's as simple as this from an Ottawa Senators perspective, and we'll have this same thing. And unless you felt like the Ottawa Senators, and part of it's health, but overall, guys, you should feel like this team right now can get on a 7 or 8 game win streak. It shouldn't be about winning 2 or do they win the next 3. They should say, hey, man, grab a hold of this division, grab a hold of at least chasing a playoff spot. And they quite simply aren't in that position. And unfortunately, until they make a coaching change, none of that is going to change.
Yeah, I'll throw it to Jake in a second here, but I just wanted to say that if I have to write another note saying defensive structure opportunities, I'm going to lose my mind.
Yeah, and I do think we get a little carried away with that. And I'll say this in that LA is a little bit different. Vancouver, we can also point out, it's not like other teams when you watch. Now, the Leafs aren't a great example because they're a gong show defensively, but it's not like teams don't give up chances. Since 05 and the new rules, it's not like you're not getting great chances. But as you said, it is a lack of cohesion. It is a lack of understanding what everyone else is doing. And then it really is the inability to ever correct anything. And last night was magnified by another Stützle turnover, another Batherson turnover. Tarasenko has been very good actually doing that. You go back to when Thomas Chabot is playing, it's a repetition. And quite simply, at the end of the day, the lack of consequences that have never been established with a group, which, as I said, they'll do some good things. And last night, if they had the ability, had the foundation to play properly, they would have won that hockey game. It's as simple as that. And that's been the story through. And I'll go back to opening night against Carolina. I thought, wow, what a start. But all of a sudden, Carolina kicked it into gear, got playing properly, just like we saw last night. And next thing you know, lights out, you've lost another hockey game.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's one of the things that I think that we're, as Sens fans, we're frustrated with is, and I think, as much as we recognize that DJ Smith is someone who has, he was brought in with obviously not the best circumstances.
No.
But he was really brought in for this period of time. And now that we're, at least my opinion is, now that we're starting to see the better players coming in, we have the Stützles, we have the Norrises, we have all of these great players coming in. Now, what kind of structure are we creating? And this is something I've made a note of, is in all 3 zones, are we strong all 3, like for 60 minutes? No.
Yeah.
We have a strong moment in the offensive zone, strong moment in the defensive zone. And then, but there's nothing that creates a full, like all 3 zones are we strong in. So that's something that I noticed at least over the past few games, and which is what I think certainly last night was on display. I don't think that it's just goaltending, but I do think that there's an opportunity there. But it's the structure overall, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. And if you want to break that down as well, you go to coaching or personnel. I think a little combination of both. When you look at the defense right now and is injured, is it great? Well, there's some holes there. There's some spots. So in D-zone coverage, but then that does come down to working as 5-man units. Do they do things properly as far as moving the puck? They don't. Taking the puck through the neutral zone, people get mad about the dump and chase. And then I say to myself, well, okay, what do you really have as far as personnel? Can you guide the puck through the neutral zone? You probably can't. And they turn the puck over. Then you get into the offensive zone. That's an interesting point you bring up in strategy. One of the reasons when Greg was healthy, and now we see with Matthew Joseph, he's one of the few people that can establish the forecheck and be strong on the puck. When you start talking about how you want to play, and this has been an issue with Ottawa since in 12 years, they don't have a group of people that can establish a half-court game down low and basically put pressure on teams. It doesn't really exist. Right now, the Norris line can't do it. Certainly as you get down to the third line and see what a guy like Järventie along with Tarasenko and Kubalik. So last night, once again, when firing properly, it's Stützle suddenly playing with Joseph and Giroux. So you're getting the balances of, do you have the right people? Are they strong enough? Are they good enough? And then you get into, as you said, the checks and balances of a coaching staff. And this would have been for DJ Smith really his last opportunity. I understood what he was trying to accomplish coming in, Chris, of you want to be the good guy, play everybody. It would have been the hammer in training camp of, no, we're not going to do it this way. If you don't do it properly, there's going to be repercussions. Now he started the season without that. And now realistically, there's no turning back. And if all of a sudden he brings the hammer down, how are the players going to react? But realistically, that ship has sailed. And I don't really understand from an ownership perspective of, okay, Is DJ Smith going to sell you more tickets, win you more hockey games the rest of the year? Probably not. Is there a pretty good chance that he could damage the business somewhat? I think so. So would it not be smarter to go out and hire a coach at this point? And some people use the excuse, well, you should have the general manager at first. Well, last time I looked, Steve Staios is in charge of hockey operations. So I don't know that you need the excuse of a GM and then bringing in a coach. And then you ask yourself, does Steve Staios even know better at this point?
Yeah, and I feel like I could talk to you for forever on this, because there are a lot of, especially as someone who's now starting to take a closer look. I'll watch the game and I'll actually be writing notes about some of the observations that I'm making. But I don't want to keep you too long, so I have just a couple more questions for you.
Yeah, and if I can make one point as well, if people, and I've said this on social media, but is there anything greater, because I go through and you try to match up personnel, and I know Ottawa's not healthy, but is there anything more of a contrast that you could explain than Korpisalo and Talbot and what we saw out of Talbot last year and watching the LA Kings play? Like, what more would I have to say to the person that doesn't know much about hockey to look at the sum of the parts in LA and how they're approaching this and what we saw out of Talbot to this year? Do you know what I mean? Like, does that not tell you that something's not right? Like, and other teams are just better. You know what I mean? And Vancouver, I don't know how far that's going to go. But the contrast this year was as simple as that. I watched the LA Kings, who are very well coached, and I've watched Ottawa. Like, come on, man. You know that a coach would make a big change here, and you'd be a lot further along.
It's the exact reason why I said that Talbot was good in Minnesota, because there was good structure in front of him. He came to Ottawa. There's not good structure in front of him. Of course, he's not going to do well. What happens in LA has good defensive structure in front of him.
Yeah.
He's incredible. And that's exactly when you have good coaching, you understand how to create that structure. That's how those, especially people like Talbot is going to be so successful. That's why he's doing so well. He has like a 940 or 930 save percentage this season.
It was like taking a goalie from Ken Hitchcock way back, right? You better be careful. All of a sudden, Brian Elliott, you're like, man, thought this guy was an all-star.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I guess now we've kind of.
I think Jake the Snake's having some issues with his video here. Hey?
He is. Just, you know what? It's fine. It's just you and I now. Just a couple of dudes hanging out.
I think it's fixed now.
All right. Good.
So we kind of broached the topic, though, before we get into maybe some super hot takes from you, because we appreciate those. Last question, and then I'll throw it to Jake for those hot takes, would be, what's your position on DJ? So obviously you've mentioned they need a new coach. So maybe what do you think he hasn't done well, although maybe it's pretty obvious? What are some of the things he's done well? And then do you have any ideas as to who you would like to see come in?
Well, I'd make a coaching change. Now, I'm not a mega DJ Smith fan, but I recognize, and part of it was, I guess, because I kind of laughed him in. I wasn't a big Pierre Dorion fan. Thought he was way in over his head, the mistakes he made, kind of the way he led things, the press conferences, and then back to when he hired DJ Smith, all this responsibility that he lumped on a guy that had never coached in the NHL. We end up with Zaitsev. And I'm like, okay, maybe Zaitsev's terrible. Why are we recommending the coach who's never coached? And could there have been more of a, and that whole quote about an elite defensive defenseman, I think, first of all, you should be fired the minute you say that, whether you're a member of the media or the coaching or management. It was ridiculous. So as you moved along, did DJ Smith bring these young players along, develop them? He sure did. He's a buddy. I guess they played. Part of me thinks that if I had Stützle, Tkachuk, and Sanderson, I'd probably open the door, and some other guys. So I think he's done a good job. Players appear to like him. You brought it to that certain point. But as far as what he's done now and what you want, well, he's not able to play the properly. And in a 32-team league now, differences are a game like last night. So who would I bring in? Well, I'd go for experience all day long. So Claude Julien. Patrick was a bit of a wild card, only because I think it might be a Donald Trump-like circus, but it's a Claude Julien who doesn't have much time, trying to correct on the go, trying to implement things like Jacques Martin did way back in the day when he took over the hockey team. So you need experience. There'll be some butting of heads, and that's the problem now. Now, as you get into December, guys, the easy schedule and the time that you would have wanted to have a coaching change would have been either the summertime or early in the season. By the time they get back from Sweden and head in December, that ship has sailed. And unfortunately, I think they're very slow to react, and I'm a little bit surprised. But it would be Claude Julien for right now.
And I agree with you. I think also when we talk about their most successful period of time, it was with Jacques Martin with great structure.
Exactly.
Claude Julien, great structure, right? And that's
exactly.
So I 100% agree. Jake, I'll throw it to you.
All right.
One question I know it's not written down or anything, but I've got to ask you: who do you think finishes the year starting more, Forsberg or Korpisalo?
Oh, I think it'll be
I
think it'll be Korpisalo. I can't say by a wide margin. I do think he's a better goaltender. Historically, it's interesting, guys. If you go back on their career, Forsberg 2 years ago played 41 games. Korpisalo's career high has only been 39. So, but he is a better goaltender. You brought him in based on the price tag, which isn't crazy, but at $4 million. And I just think overall, and here's a little thing too. I know analytics is a huge part of hockey, and I do respect it. There's numbers you look at. But this is a little bit like, and I can't even remember what baseball, if it was the Blue Jays late in the season when Barrios was pitching great in the playoffs, but analytics told him to switch him out. Okay, I understand that. But you're sitting there watching and you're like, okay, you played in Toronto. You haven't played any games. Why would you not play Korpisalo the next night? People say, well, analytically, well, unless you tell me it's 100% that starting the guy the second night, I'm guaranteed to lose. Why would you not go on and start him last night? And I'm not going to blame the game on Forsberg, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to get a run out of Korpisalo. And also for this crew, to be taken seriously at this point, you're going to have to win 5, 6, 7, or 8 games. If they win the next 3 and they're a little bit above 500, then they lose a couple of more. This should be a team, and this should be an opportunity where you're looking at Boston, looking at Vegas, and saying, hey, let's get on a legitimate run here. And to me, that's behind Korpisalo. And I like Forsberg. But like I say, Korpisalo is your number one.
Nice. I agree. Last hot take, or maybe the last hot take. Who finishes with the most points this season?
On the Sens?
Yeah.
Well, obviously you're asking me on the Sens. Who finished with? I guess I'll go with Stützle. But you know what? It's a fun debate to have in a sense of Giroux has been pretty good. You've ended up with Tkachuk. Norris isn't bad. And then of all people, I crapped all over Tarasenko. He's been pretty surprising. But I'll say Timmy at the end of the day. But kind of a nice discussion to have. And even on the back end, you basically have Shabbat this your third option offensively behind Chychrun, behind Sanderson. But yeah, I'll say Timmy Stützle. But that's certainly not an issue overall, is that you got a number of guys that should be pretty close to a point a game.
What do you think Stützle ends with? Like, what does he finish? Does he cross the century mark?
I don't feel that. I don't feel that as a hockey team that they're going to be quite possible of that. But I'll go. He'll go north. What was he last year? 91?
90 last year.
90. Okay, I'll go 95. I don't know, but maybe with scoring being up in the league, it'll be a bit higher. He hasn't even, and I guess more to what you're saying, can't even say he's played his best hockey, and he's already at 14 points.
Yeah.
So I guess based on what I'm just saying right there, multiply that by 8, then I guess we're past the century mark. So, but I'll still go 95.
Yeah. Not great on the goal sheet, but great on the point sheet for sure. The assists have been really great for teams.
Yeah, and that's also an interesting dynamic with the Sens because part of the group and Joseph has been unbelievable to Giroux. And that's part where I think it's been minimized a bit is that Brady's not really a mega playmaker, nor is Norris, nor a few other guys, to the point of that's where I've been so impressed with Tarasenko. And I think they're missing a little something there in the combination of Norris and Tkachuk. They actually need a better playmaker than Batherson. So that's a look that I would like to see.
Agreed.
Well, I'm gonna close you out right there. I'm gonna say thank you so much for talking to our podcast.
What happened to the hot takes for the Sens? I thought we were going rapid fire.
Right there.
We didn't want to keep you too much longer, so we just went with like the top priority at that point. Yeah. We'll have you on again, and we'll do just hot takes.
Yeah, no problem, boys. Yeah. Well, thanks very much for having me on. Enjoy the weekend, and it should be a fun week next week as they go to Sweden.
Before we let you go, though, we want to let you talk.
What's my gift for coming on? Are you going to present me with a car or something?
Yeah, it's outside right now. Just go outside. We've left the keys in the ignition for you.
I love it. You guys are the best.
But before we let you go, we wanted to give you an opportunity just to shout out your new podcast, talk a little bit more about it. We really appreciate it. It's been really great to listen to your podcast. So we just wanted to give you this opportunity to kind of give you a shout out.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That would be the part where you guys probably edit it out after we get off, but that's okay. At least for the live listeners, we've got it. But it's the Simmer Down Sick podcast. Nice group out of Montreal. Tony Marinero recommended it, so hopped on. I've had Justin Murray, of course, who scouted for the Sens for years, co-host, and today had Ian Lee. It's just kind of starting out, and now the first week here, we had some fun, had some real nice feedback, talking about my lighting, talking about other things. And then we'll start hitting some guests, and it should be a whole lot of fun. So to me, it was just kind of start out, get busy. Of course, it is Simmer Down on Sick Podcast. And next week, having some fun as we get into the guests. And I think I have them. It would be Mark Mathod on Monday. We've got Cheryl Pounder. We've got Ian Mendez. We've got a whole group, Michael Landsberg, coming up. But next week will just be a whole lot of fun kind of talking some hockey, getting people interested in that. I think Nick Kipper also hop on with us. So it'll be a mix of just everything. See what it feels like, where it flows to, and just have some fun talking some hockey.
You have some heavy hitters coming on and some really well-respected voices. So we appreciate that, and that you're able to connect with those folks. And speaking of connecting with us, you connected with us. So thank you for that. Really appreciate that. Jake, you want to wrap things up?
Yeah, I just want to take an extra minute to thank you so very much. We will not be editing that out, by the way. We will not. I want that on record.
No problem, brother.
We wanted to thank you so much for coming on, and sorry for my technical difficulties.
No worries. That's one of the beautiful parts, and radio is one of the things you learn. Nobody knows other than if they're watching the audio portion. They don't know that you took off and probably had a couple shots of vodka, did whatever else, and then came back. It is happy hour on a Friday, so we're good to go.
Thanks so much, Simmer. Really appreciate your time tonight. Okay,
boys, have a great day. Cheers.
You too.
Bye now.